The Galactic Empire had been waiting for this moment for 300 years. Every intelligence agency across 12,000 star systems had files on humanity. Thick files, terrifying files. The kind of files that made seasoned military commanders lose sleep and reach for strong drinks. Humans came from Earth, a death world, a planet so hostile that it regularly tried to kill everything living on it. The place had earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, and something called Australia that seemed to exist purely out of spite. The water was full of things with teeth. The land was full of things with claws. Even the plants were dangerous. And somehow, against all logic and probability, humans had not only survived there, they had thrived. The reports were deeply disturbing. Humans had domesticated wolves. They had taken apex predators and turned them into pets that slept on their beds and wore little sweaters. They consumed poison for entertainment. Alcohol, caffeine, capsaicin, things that would kill most species, humans put in their food on purpose. They had survived ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, wars against each other that killed millions. And through all of it, they had kept going. Not because they were strong or smart or lucky, but because they were too stubborn to stop. High Chancellor Vorix Tan had spent 50 years preparing for humanity's arrival on the galactic stage. He had mobilized the finest security forces in the Empire. He had assembled teams of psychological warfare specialists. He had emergency response units on standby across the entire capital sector. The greatest minds in the galaxy had written thousands of papers predicting how first contact would go. Most of them expected violence. Some expected attempted conquest. A few optimistic souls hoped for mutual respect between warriors. No one predicted what actually happened. The human diplomatic vessel was a small thing, ugly by galactic standards. It looked like it had been built by someone who cared more about function than form. It docked at Thessar Prime, the glittering jewel of the Galactic Empire, without any ceremony. 10,000 officials waited in the grand arrival hall. The architecture was designed to inspire awe. Crystal spires rose 300 meters into the air. Floating platforms carried dignitaries from 100 different species. Light bent in ways that physics barely allowed, creating rainbows that existed in colors most beings could not name. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was the first human to step off the ship. She was a small woman, middle-aged by human standards. Her hair was going gray at the temples, and there were lines around her eyes that suggested she had spent a lot of time either laughing or frowning. She wore a simple dark suit that looked practical rather than impressive. Behind her came her delegation. Marcus Chen, her security officer, a large man with a calm face and hands that looked like they knew how to break things. Dr. Priya Sharma, the science advisor, young with bright eyes and a tablet computer she kept glancing at, and Thomas Wright, the cultural attaché, tall, thin, and already looking around with mild curiosity. The assembled dignitaries held their breath. Security officers tightened their grips on weapons. Psychic sensitives braced for the mental assault they had been warned about. Elena Vasquez looked around the grand arrival hall. She took in the crystal spires, the floating platforms, the assembled might of the galaxy's greatest civilization. Then she yawned. It was not a dramatic yawn, not a statement of contempt or a display of dominance. It was the simple, honest yawn of someone who had been traveling for a very long time and had not slept well. She turned to her aide. "The time difference is going to kill me." "What is that? Like a 40-hour day here?" Thomas Wright checked his tablet. 37.6 hours, ma'am." "Wonderful." She did not sound like she thought it was wonderful. "Is there coffee on this planet?" "Please tell me there's coffee." High Chancellor Vorix Tan stepped forward. He was an impressive figure, 7 feet tall with scales that shimmered between blue and purple. His ceremonial robes alone were worth more than most planetary economies. He had rehearsed this moment for decades. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, his voice booming through the hall with practiced authority, "on behalf of the 12,000 civilizations of the Galactic Empire, I welcome humanity to the stars. You stand now in Thessar Prime, jewel of the cosmos, seat of power for—" "Yes, very nice," Elena said. She was not being rude. She was just clearly not paying full attention. "I'm sorry, it's beautiful, really, But we've been in that ship for 6 weeks and I haven't had real food in 3. Is there somewhere we can check in? Maybe get something to eat? Behind the Chancellor, a senior military commander made a small choking sound. Dr. Sharma had wandered away from the group. She was examining one of the crystal pillars with scientific interest. These are grown, aren't they? Some kind of silicon-based crystalline structure? Fascinating. The lattice pattern is very regular. You must have excellent quality control. Marcus Chen was standing with his hands clasped behind his back, looking around the hall with the expression of a man who was mentally cataloging exits. He noticed a group of armed guards watching him nervously and nodded politely at them. Several of them flinched. The humidity here is something else, Thomas Wright said to no one in particular. He had pulled out a small device and was checking readings. 87%. My sinuses are going to hate this. High Chancellor Vorix Tan had given thousands of speeches. He had negotiated with warlords and dictators. He had faced down assassination attempts without breaking his composure. But nothing in his long career had prepared him for this. The humans were not impressed. They were not scared. They were not aggressive. They were not even particularly interested. They were just tired, mildly inconvenienced, ready to get through the formalities and find somewhere to sleep. Of course, the Chancellor said, because he could not think of anything else to say. We have prepared quarters for your delegation, the finest accommodations in the capital. Great, Elena said. She smiled, and it was a genuine smile, warm and tired. Lead the way, and seriously, if there's anything like coffee here, I will be your friend forever. As the human delegation was led away, the assembled dignitaries stood in stunned silence. That's it? Someone whispered. Where's the dominance display? Should we be concerned that they're not concerned? High Chancellor Vorix Tan watched the humans walk away. Ambassador Vasquez was asking her aide about the Wi-Fi situation. Dr. Sharma was still taking notes about the crystal architecture. Marcus Chen had somehow acquired a piece of fruit from somewhere and was eating it while he walked. These were the Deathworlders, the apex predators, the species that had conquered their own planet through sheer stubborn refusal to die. And they were bored. The Chancellor had a terrible feeling that this was going to be much more complicated than anyone had expected. The Grand Diplomatic Gala was the most expensive event in Imperial history. High Chancellor Vorix Tan had ordered it personally. If the humans had not been impressed by the arrival ceremony, then they would surely be impressed by this. The Empire would show them exactly how powerful and magnificent galactic civilization truly was. The Great Hall of Unity had been transformed. It was already the largest enclosed space in the capital, big enough to hold a small mountain. But for tonight, it had been made into something that bordered on religious experience. Living light flowed through the air like rivers of color. Music played from instruments that existed partly in dimensions humans could not see. The floor was made of something that looked like solid starlight, and every step created ripples of color that spread outward like waves. 3,000 species were in attendance, beings of every shape and size and form. Creatures made of crystal, creatures made of gas, creatures that were mostly teeth. Creatures that existed as mathematical equations given physical form. The food alone had cost more than most planets made in a year. Delicacies from across the galaxy, prepared by chefs who had trained for centuries. Drinks that sparkled with actual captured starlight. Desserts that existed in 4 dimensions and tasted different depending on which angle you approached them from. Entertainment had been brought from the far corners of known space. The singing crystals of Morrow performed their famous harmony that could make stones weep. The dancers of the void moved in ways that temporarily broke the local laws of physics. A famous Zalathi warlord had been convinced to attend and share tales of his 400 years of conquest. Everything was designed to overwhelm, to impress, to make the humans understand exactly where they stood in the grand hierarchy of the cosmos. The human delegation arrived exactly on time. Ambassador Elena Vasquez wore the same practical dark suit she had worn before. She had at least added a small pin to her lapel that sparkled slightly. Her aide Thomas Wright had made some effort, wearing what appeared to be a slightly nicer version of his previous clothes. Dr. Priya Sharma looked distracted, already examining the architecture with scientific curiosity. Marcus Chen wore exactly what he had worn before. When asked if he had considered dressing up for the occasion, he had reportedly shrugged and said, "This is dressing up." They entered the Great Hall of Unity. 3,000 species turned to watch. The music swelled dramatically. Elena looked around. She nodded politely. "Very nice," she said. "I like what you've done with the lighting." That was it. The Chancellor's assistant had prepared a list of talking points, topics that would surely impress the humans. The military might of the Empire, the technological achievements that spanned millennia, the philosophical traditions that had shaped galactic civilization. Elena listened politely to all of it. She asked occasional questions that suggested she was paying attention, but there was no awe in her eyes, no fear, no burning desire to prove human worth. She just seemed like someone who was attending a work function and trying to be professional about it. Marcus Chen spent most of the evening in conversation with Ambassador Kreth Vor, a massive insectoid being who had personally led the conquest of 37 star systems. Kreth Vor had 400 years of military victories to his name. He had crushed rebellions and ended civilizations. His very presence was supposed to inspire terror. "So the key is really just logistics," Marcus was saying. "You can have the best soldiers in the galaxy, but if you can't feed them and supply them, you're dead in the water." Krethvor found himself nodding along. This was not how the conversation was supposed to go. He was supposed to be intimidating the human, not having a pleasant discussion about supply chain management. "Your species has experience with large-scale military operations?" Krethvor asked. "Oh, some," Marcus said casually. "We've had a few big ones. World War II had about 70 million casualties. That was rough." Krethvor's translator must have made an error. 70 million of your own species? "Yeah, give or take. The records aren't great for some regions." Marcus took a sip of his drink. "We got better after that, mostly. Learned some lessons." Krethvor excused himself shortly afterward. He needed to sit down. Across the hall, Dr. Sharma had found the refreshment table. She was working her way through the various offerings with methodical curiosity, making notes on her tablet about each one. "You are not overwhelmed by our cuisine?" asked a being made entirely of crystalline light. It was a luminari, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They found most physical beings somewhat primitive. "It's very good," Priya said honestly. "This one especially, what's in it?" "It contains the essence of a dying star, captured at the moment of collapse." "Huh. It's a little sweet for my taste, but interesting." She made a note. "We have a candy back home that's kind of similar. Not as fancy, obviously, but the flavor profile is close." The luminary did not know how to respond to having their stellar cuisine compared to human candy. Elena had been cornered by a delegation from the Merchant Consortium. They were trying to explain the vast wealth and economic power they represented, trade networks that spanned thousands of light years, resources that could buy and sell entire civilizations. "So it's basically like Amazon," Elena said, "but in space." No one knew what Amazon was, but somehow the comparison felt insulting. The climax of the evening was supposed to be the Selathi warlord. His name was Thrax Mul, and he was ancient by any standard. His scales were scarred from 1,000 battles. He had personally killed beings that most species only knew from legends. He approached Marcus Chen with clear intent to intimidate. "Human," Thrax Mul growled. "I have burned worlds. I have ended civilizations that existed before your species learned to walk upright. I have waded through oceans of blood and climbed mountains of bones." Marcus listened politely. When Thraxmul finished, Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That reminds me of this documentary I watched about Genghis Khan," he said. "Same kind of energy. Have you seen it? They made a really good one a few years back." Thraxmul had no idea what to say. "He was this human conqueror," Marcus continued helpfully. "Killed something like 40 million people. Changed the climate even, because so many people died that forests grew back on their farmland. Interesting guy." Thraxmul looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without another word. He spent the rest of the evening drinking heavily and avoiding eye contact with any humans. By the end of the gala, the damage was done. The humans had not been impressed. They had not been intimidated. They had not been awed by the collected might of galactic civilization. They had been pleasant, professional, politely interested in the same way someone might be interested in a decent museum exhibit. And word began to spread through the capital. The humans were not afraid because they had nothing to fear. They had seen all of this before. The wars, the conquests, the grand displays of power. They had done all of it themselves, to themselves. What could the galaxy possibly show them that they had not already survived? Ambassador Elena Vasquez returned to her quarters that night and immediately complained about her feet hurting from standing so long. She asked her aide if there was any progress on finding decent coffee. Tomorrow there would be more meetings, more opportunities for the Empire to try to understand these strange, unflappable creatures. But for now, Elena just wanted to sleep. It had been a long day, and she was tired. She was always tired. Imperial intelligence was not happy. Director Vexthorn had served the Empire for 200 years. She had uncovered conspiracies that threatened civilizations. She had broken codes that were supposed to be unbreakable. She had looked into the hearts of the galaxy's most dangerous beings and learned their secrets. But she could not figure out the humans. They had to be hiding something. That was the only explanation that made sense. No species could be genuinely this calm, this unimpressed, this completely unbothered by everything they encountered. The humans must have secret weapons, advanced technology, perhaps some kind of psychic shielding that made them immune to fear. "We need to test them," Director Vexthorn said to her assembled team. "Push them. Find their limits. Whatever they're hiding, we need to know about it before they become a threat." The tests began the next day. The first test was the military display. The humans were invited to observe the Imperial Grand Fleet, the most powerful collection of warships ever assembled. 2,000 vessels, each one capable of destroying a planet. They hung in space like a wall of death, blocking out the stars themselves. Admiral Cross Ven, commander of the fleet, stood proudly on the observation deck. He had spent decades building this force. It represented the absolute peak of galactic military technology. "Impressive," Elena said, looking out at the ships. Admiral Cross Ven allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. Finally, a reaction. "But I'm curious about the fuel efficiency," Elena continued. She pulled out a small notebook. "How do the power plants compare to our fusion systems? We've had some issues with heat dissipation on long-range vessels." The Admiral blinked. "You want to discuss fuel efficiency?" "Well, yes. A fleet this size must cost a fortune to run. How do you handle the logistics?" This was not the conversation Admiral Cross Ven had expected to have. He found himself answering questions about supply chains and maintenance schedules while Elena took careful notes. She seemed genuinely interested, but not in the way he had hoped. Dr. Sharma asked if she could see the engine specifications. Thomas Wright wondered about the crew accommodations. Marcus Chen wanted to know about their emergency evacuation procedures, which he felt were probably inadequate based on what he could see. The military display was declared a failure. The second test was more psychological. The humans were brought before the Tribunal of Shadows, three ancient beings who had existed since before most stars were born. They lived in a chamber of absolute darkness, and their presence alone had driven entire species to madness. The tribunal did not speak with words. They communicated directly with the mind, forcing their thoughts into the consciousness of anyone who entered their domain. Most beings who faced them experienced their worst fears, their deepest shames, their most terrible memories all at once. The human delegation entered the chamber. Dr. Sharma looked around curiously. "Is it supposed to be this dark? I can't see anything." The tribunal began their assault. They reached into the minds of the humans, searching for fear, for weakness, for anything they could use. Elena felt a cold presence in her thoughts. It showed her images of failure, of disappointing people who trusted her, of making mistakes that could not be fixed. She sighed. "Yes, I know. I think about this stuff all the time anyway. Do you have anything new?" Marcus felt the tribunal trying to show him violence, combat, death, all the terrible things a soldier might fear. He had seen real combat. He had lost friends. He had done things that kept him awake at night. Whatever the tribunal was showing him felt pale and thin compared to his actual memories. Also, he was very tired. The time difference on this planet was still bothering him. Without meaning to, he began to doze off. The Tribunal of Shadows had never had someone fall asleep during their psychic assault before. Dr. Sharma, meanwhile, was fascinated. How does this work exactly? Is it telepathy? Some kind of quantum entanglement? I'd love to study this. The tribunal withdrew in confusion. They had no idea what to do with beings who responded to psychological torture with mild inconvenience and scientific curiosity. Elena thanked them for their time as the delegation left. She was very polite about it. The psychological test was declared an even bigger failure. Director Vexthorn decided to try something more direct. If the humans would not react to displays of power or psychological pressure, perhaps they would react to genuine danger. A staged assassination attempt was arranged. The humans were walking through a public garden when a figure lunged out from behind a decorative bush. He was a trained operative, but his instructions were clear. Attack the humans, but do not actually harm them. See how they respond to threat. The operative rushed toward Elena with a blade that looked real, but was actually harmless. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Elena stepped to the side, caught the operative's arm, twisted it in a way that should not have been physically possible, and put him on the ground. The blade clattered away harmlessly. She had one knee on his back before anyone else had time to react. "Are you okay?" she asked the operative. He was not sure how to answer that question. That looked like it hurt. "Do you need medical attention?" Elena genuinely seemed more concerned about him than about the fact that he had just tried to attack her. Marcus had not even moved. He had watched the whole thing with the calm expression of someone who had known exactly how it would end before it started. "Self-defense class," Elena explained to the shocked onlookers as she helped the operative stand up. "I took one in college. You'd be surprised how often it comes in handy." The operative was taken away for questioning. He reported that the human ambassador had asked him if he was having a bad day and whether he wanted to talk about anything. She had seemed sincere. Director Vexthorn received the reports from all 3 tests. She sat in her office for a long time, staring at the data. The humans had no secret weapons, no psychic shields, no advanced technology hidden away for emergencies. They were just like this. A species that had been fighting for survival since before they learned to speak had arrived in a galaxy full of wonders and horrors, and their primary response was mild interest and occasional inconvenience. They were not pretending to be unimpressed. They genuinely were not impressed, because nothing here was actually new to them. Powerful weapons? They had those. Mind games? They played those on each other constantly. Assassination attempts? A normal Tuesday in human politics. The galaxy had spent millennia preparing for dangerous aliens, aggressive conquerors, hostile invaders. They had not prepared for visitors who responded to everything with the patient endurance of a species that had already seen it all. Director Vexthorn wrote her report with shaking hands. The humans were not hiding their power. Their power was that they did not need to hide anything. They had walked into the center of galactic civilization and found nothing that scared them. That, she concluded, was terrifying. Kirisol was not important. This was not her being humble. It was simply a fact. She was a junior analyst in the Imperial Cultural Studies Division, which was itself a minor branch of a minor department. Her job was to read reports and write summaries that were probably read by no one. She had been assigned to the human delegation because no one else wanted the job. The senior analysts were afraid. The military was frustrated. The politicians were confused. Everyone with any power or influence was staying as far away from the humans as possible. So they sent Kirisol. "Just talk to them," her supervisor had said. "Find out who they really are, what they want, why they're like this." Kirisol was a small being, barely 4 feet tall, with soft gray fur and large dark eyes. Her species, the Milani, were known for being gentle and non-threatening. Perhaps that was why they sent her. The humans could not possibly see her as a danger. She found Ambassador Elena Vasquez sitting alone in one of the capital's many gardens. The human was on a bench, holding a cup of something hot, watching the alien flowers bloom and close in their daily cycle. "May I sit?" Kirisol asked. Elena looked at her and smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. "Of course, please." They sat together in silence for a while. Kirisol was not sure how to begin. All her training had not prepared her for this. She had expected the humans to be difficult, aggressive, complicated. Instead, Elena just seemed like a person who was having a quiet moment. "Can I ask you something?" Kira's soul said finally. "Anything. Why are you not afraid?" Elena considered the question seriously. She took a sip of her drink before answering. "Afraid of what specifically?" "Everything." Kira's soul gestured around them. "This whole place, the Empire, the tests they've been putting you through, the Tribunal of Shadows, everything." Elena laughed softly. It was not a mocking laugh, more like she had heard a familiar joke. "Do you know where humans come from?" she asked. "Earth. A death world." "Yes." "Do you know what that means?" Kirisol nodded. "A planet with extreme conditions, dangerous wildlife, natural disasters. That's part of it." Elena looked up at the alien sky. "But it's not just that the planet is dangerous. It's that it's been trying to kill us since before we were human. We evolved there. Every part of us was shaped by constant, unending struggle." She turned to look at Kirisol directly. "We've been through ice ages, the whole planet frozen, and our ancestors survived by sheer determination. We've been through plagues that killed half of everyone alive. We've survived asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, magnetic pole reversals. The universe has thrown everything it has at us, and we're still here. But surely the galaxy is different," Kirisol said. "More advanced, more powerful." "Is it, though?" Elena smiled sadly. "Your Tribunal of Shadows tried to show me my worst fears. Do you know what I saw? Failure, disappointing people, making mistakes I can't fix, normal human anxiety. We deal with that every day. We don't need ancient psychic beings to show us our fears. We carry them with us constantly." Kirisol listened, her large eyes growing wider. "Your warlord told Marcus about his conquests, burning worlds, ending civilizations. Marcus has read about human history. He knows what we've done to each other. Genghis Khan, the world wars, countless other conflicts, millions of deaths. We've seen the worst beings can do because we've done it ourselves." "That sounds terrible," Kirisol said quietly. "It is terrible. It's also true." Elena finished her drink. "We're not brave, Kirisol. We're not fearless. We're just used to it. We're exhausted." "Exhausted?" "Tired, down to our bones. We've been fighting for survival since we crawled out of the ocean. We've had to be strong for so long that we don't know how to be anything else. When we look around this galaxy, we don't see wonders and terrors that we've never imagined. We see more of the same." She pointed to the crystal spires visible above the garden walls. "Those are beautiful, really beautiful. But we have the Grand Canyon. We have mountains and oceans and forests that would take your breath away. We've already seen beauty." She pointed toward the military district. "Those ships are impressive, but we've been building weapons to kill each other for thousands of years. We've already seen power." She turned back to Kiri's soul. "The psychic beings who tried to break us? We have middle school. Trust me, human children do worse to each other before lunch." Kiri's soul made a small sound that might have been a laugh. "The galaxy expected us to be impressed," Elena continued, "to be scared, to be something you could understand and categorize, threat or ally, predator or prey. But we're neither. We're just people who are very, very tired." "What do you want then?" Kira's soul asked. "If not power or conquest?" Elena thought about it. "Coffee mostly. A good night's sleep. Maybe some peace and quiet." She laughed. "We didn't come out here to conquer anything. We came out here because we were curious, and because staying on one planet seemed risky. What if something happened to Earth? We've learned not to put all our eggs in one basket." "All your eggs." "Sorry, human expression. It means don't risk everything on one thing." Elena stood up and stretched. "We just want to live, to explore, to find our place in all of this. We're not here to fight anyone." "But you could fight," Kira's soul said, "if you had to." Elena's expression changed slightly. Still kind, but with something harder underneath. "Yes, we could. We've had a lot of practice." She softened again. "But we'd really rather not. Fighting is exhausting, and like I said, we're already tired." Kiri's soul wrote her report that night. She wrote it honestly, without any of the political maneuvering that usually shapes such documents. The humans were not hiding anything. They were not secretly powerful or secretly weak. They were exactly what they appeared to be. A species forged by constant struggle, tempered by unending hardship, and left profoundly, permanently tired by the whole experience. They were not impressed by the galaxy because the galaxy reminded them of home. Just bigger, just older, but not fundamentally different. The report caused chaos in the Imperial Senate. Philosophers debated what it meant. Military leaders argued about threat assessments. Politicians tried to figure out how to relate to beings who did not play by any of the expected rules. But for Kiri's soul, the conclusion was simple. The humans were not monsters. They were not saviors. They were not the conquerors the galaxy had feared, or the primitives some had hoped for. They were just people. Tired, pragmatic, remarkably resilient people who had walked into the center of galactic civilization and seen nothing they had not already survived. And somehow that was the most remarkable thing of all. 6 months passed. The galaxy slowly, reluctantly accepted that the humans were not going to change. They were not going to suddenly reveal hidden weapons or secret plans. They were not going to become the terrifying conquerors that centuries of intelligence reports had predicted. They were just going to keep being themselves, polite, professional, mildly sarcastic, perpetually looking for coffee. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had become something of a legend. Though not for any of the reasons the Empire had expected. She was known for being reasonable, for listening, for treating every species she met with the same patient, slightly tired respect. And she was very, very good at her job. The Kreth-Vendari conflict had been building for 300 years. Two ancient civilizations, fighting over a hyperspace lane that both claimed belonged to them. Wars had been fought. Billions had died. Peace treaties had been signed and broken so many times that no one bothered keeping count anymore. The latest crisis had brought both sides to the edge of total war. Fleets were mobilizing. Ultimatums were being delivered. The rest of the galaxy was preparing for the devastation that would follow. Elena called a meeting. She sat both ambassadors down in a small conference room. Not the grand halls they were used to, not the impressive chambers designed to intimidate. Just a simple room with a table and chairs and a pot of coffee that she had finally managed to find somewhere in the capital. "Okay," she said, pouring herself a cup. "Talk to me. What's this actually about?" The Kreth ambassador launched into a speech about ancestral rights and sacred territory. The Vendari ambassador countered with historical claims and legal precedents. They talked over each other, getting louder and angrier. Elena let them go for about 10 minutes. Then she held up her hand. "Stop, both of you." Her voice was not loud, but something in it made them both fall silent. "I've read the files. 300 years of fighting over a hyperspace lane. Do you know how many beings have died in that time?" Neither ambassador answered. "Neither do you. Not exactly, because after a while the numbers get too big to mean anything." Elena took a sip of her coffee. "Here's what I see. You both want the same thing, control of that lane, and you've both convinced yourselves that the other side will never give it up. So you keep fighting. They cannot be trusted," the Kreth ambassador said. "They have betrayed every agreement," the Vendari ambassador added. "Probably true, on both counts." Elena nodded. "But let me ask you something. What happens if you win? Let's say one of you completely destroys the other, wipes them out entirely, takes the hyperspace lane forever. Then what? Silence. You rebuild. You deal with the cost of the war. You try to get back to normal. And eventually you find something else to fight about. Because that's what happens. We know. We've done it enough times ourselves." She leaned forward. "I'm not going to tell you that fighting is wrong. Sometimes fighting is necessary. Sometimes there's no other choice. But this," she gestured vaguely, "this isn't necessary. This is habit. You've been doing it so long that you've forgotten how to stop." The Kreth ambassador started to object. Elena raised her hand again. "I don't have the energy for a war right now, and honestly, neither do you. I can see it. You're both tired. Your people are tired. Everyone is tired." She smiled slightly. "So let's figure out something else. Something that doesn't involve more dying." It took 3 weeks of negotiations. Elena drank approximately 200 cups of coffee. She barely slept. She listened to the same arguments over and over again, and she responded to each one with the same patient, exhausted determination. In the end, they reached an agreement: joint control of the hyperspace lane, shared profits, a framework for resolving future disputes without military action. It was not a perfect solution. No one was completely happy, but no one was going to die over it either. When the agreement was signed, both ambassadors looked at Elena with something like confusion. "How did you do that?" the Kreth ambassador asked. Elena shrugged. "I've sat through a lot of meetings. You learn to find the compromise eventually, mostly because you get too tired to keep arguing." Word spread through the galaxy. The humans had resolved a conflict that had lasted 3 centuries. Not through force or intimidation, not through brilliant strategy or superior technology. Through patience and stubbornness and an apparently infinite tolerance for difficult conversations. Other delegations started coming to the humans for help. Border disputes, trade disagreements, cultural conflicts that had been simmering for generations. The humans helped where they could. They were not miracle workers. Some problems were too deep to solve with a few meetings and a pot of coffee. But they approached every situation with the same attitude. Calm, practical, willing to sit and listen for as long as it took. Dr. Priya Sharma established a research exchange program with 7 different species. She was particularly interested in medical technology, and she shared human knowledge freely in return for learning opportunities. Her work would eventually lead to treatments that saved millions of lives across the galaxy. Marcus Chen was recruited to consult on security matters. His approach was strange by galactic standards. He focused less on overwhelming force and more on logistics, efficiency, and avoiding fights in the first place. Several military academies adopted his methods, though they were not entirely sure why they worked. Thomas Wright became the galaxy's unofficial expert on human culture. He gave lectures that were always packed. Beings from across known space came to hear him explain why humans put poison in their food, why they kept predators as pets, why they seemed to find everything both terrible and amusing at the same time. And Elena continued to do what she did best. She talked to people. She listened. She found common ground where no one else could see it. She drank enormous amounts of coffee and complained about never getting enough sleep. The galaxy had expected conquerors, warriors, threats that needed to be contained or destroyed. Instead, they got middle managers, bureaucrats, beings who approached every crisis with the weary determination of people who had too much work to do and not enough time to do it. High Chancellor Vorix Tan eventually came to terms with the truth. In a speech to the Imperial Senate, he admitted that every prediction about humanity had been wrong. "We prepared for monsters where one," he said. "We received neighbors. We prepared for war. We received offers of cooperation. We prepared for beings who would try to dominate us. We received beings who just wanted to find decent coffee and maybe get some rest." He paused. "Perhaps that is the most human thing of all." They walked into the center of galactic civilization, saw everything we had built over millennia, and their first question was not about power or conquest. It was about where they could get a good cup of coffee. The Senate did not know how to respond to that. In her quarters that night, Elena Vasquez read the transcript of the Chancellor's speech. She smiled slightly. "They still don't really get it," she said to Marcus, who was reviewing security reports nearby. "Nope," he agreed. "We're not special. We're not brave or strong or uniquely capable. We're just—" She searched for the right word. "Tired," Marcus offered. "Tired," Elena agreed. "Too tired to be impressed. Too tired to be scared. Too tired to do anything but keep going." She looked out the window at the alien stars. "But I guess that's enough." "It's always been enough." Marcus nodded. He understood. They all understood. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars, and the 1,000 other disasters that the universe had thrown at them. They had kept going when any sensible species would have given up. Not because they were heroes, just because they did not know how to stop. And now they were in the stars, still tired, still stubborn, still looking for good coffee and a decent night's sleep. The galaxy had wanted warriors. They got survivors instead. And somehow that was exactly what the galaxy needed.